G'day and welcome to Marcus Sam After Work. Today I want to go through a quick video on leveling your rifle scope. Well, actually what I'm talking about is just the leveling of the rifle scope. I have a full 3-part video which goes through this mounting a rifle scope with all the bits and pieces of how to get it on there and different choices and what I suggest, all that sort of stuff. This is just one for those people who we're quite common to get questions of how do you level your rifle scope? How do you level? How do you level the reticle? How do you level it? So that's what this short video is about. What we start with is a level rail. So we've verified our rail to our chassis in the way of and to our barreled action. And that's simply by making sure we've got our rifle straight up and down. We can see that by eye. You can measure it. Most of them will have a point where you can actually see where it is level on that sort of score. So that's straight. We know that our action is straight. We've verified that our rail is on properly and it is straight in whatever form, whether there's flat surfaces or we're just relying on the rail, but we're making sure that's flat. And really, with it all set up, all bolted together, with decent equipment, you should find that that's straight to the chassis or to the stock. And what I tend to like to do, as you can see, I use these little bubble levels to verify things. Sometimes you won't have that, so you do this before you set your scope on. You get a normal little spirit level out of the hardware store, but you simply put it on and you verify. What I try and do is get a point where I can see outside of the scope where I know it's not going to move, but I know that's actually my level. So I know on this one, this is a little Boyd stock, I know back here is nice and level. It's the same as the rail, so that's all straight and I've got it level. So that's what I do. The next thing you do is put your scope in your rings. We obviously mount your rings. Whatever you're doing there, you put your scope in your rings and make sure that you do the basics of working out your eye relief. There's different times to do this, but in this sort of setup, that's how you do it. You work out your eye relief. So you get down behind there and make sure you've got your scope wherever that is to suit your eye relief. A quick interlude of what you can do prior to this. If you're uncertain about the reticle to your turrets to your scope, how straight all that sort of stuff is, before you even get to putting it on the rifle, you can go through the process of checking your setting it up on the bench in some other form, rest it on some little V-blocks or whatever it is, get your turret straight in whatever position it is. It can be uneven one side or the other side, that doesn't matter at this stage. If you set up on top here and make sure that's straight, and then look through your scope. Look onto something straight. A very simple thing to use is the likes of a plumb bob, so a piece of string, hanging off a rafter, wherever it is, with a nut and the bolt of it, so it hangs dead straight. Trust gravity. You can't always trust builders. You can't always trust architecture. You certainly can't trust the landscape. You can trust gravity. So using a plumb bob and making sure that's lined up to your reticle and dead straight, and verify a point on your scope that is straight to that. Now, if the turret's not to start off with, turn the turret around. See, there's a point where the position where that is straight. But that's what you're looking for, is to make sure that's straight to that. So then, and you can do that afterwards, you can do it before, not a bad idea if you've got doubts or you want to be absolutely certain, is you do it prior to that, then stick your scope in here, then work out your eye relief, and then you're 3/4 of the way there. The next bit of the process is pretty simple. Put your caps on, run your screws down evenly and carefully, keeping sure that the gaps are even on either side, but really you're just using your fingertips. I tend to like to do it exactly what you're seeing here. I leave the bubble level there and I go around and nip up the bolts. They're all finger tight, and then I'll go a little bit further than finger tight. Whether you want to do that in stages and progresses on your torque wrench, where you go up to 5 inch-pounds and then 10 and then 15 and wherever you're heading, but basically doing a crosshatch pattern across here so that we are not tensioning up one side too much on the other side. If you find that it's starting to move one way, you'll generally find that if you start to just put a little bit more tension or just a little bit more running the bolt down the other side, you'll tend to straighten it up. Sometimes it'll take 3 or 4 times to get it to figure out exactly how that does down, but essentially you want to end up with that all tensioned. I'll do that just at the low tension for the moment. That all tensioned, and your bubble levels are still pointing in the right direction. Make sure that you do both caps at the same time. You don't want to tension up one end, then tension the other end. You can actually be torquing the tube if you don't do this very gradually and get it all even. That's it. I'll go through and double check that again, but for a video that's done. The bubble levels are both dead straight, and that's on there, that's straight. We've verified the action to the rifle. We've verified the turret to the crosshairs, so to our reticle, so we know we've got that all straight. At this moment is when I mount I'm not going to do it on this one here, these are the wrong size, but I mount a bubble level. At this moment is when I put the bubble level onto the scope tube, and make sure that level is leveled as well. Make sure it all coincides with each other. A lot of people talk about how they trust the reticle and they shoot long range or extreme long range just on the reticle, and they can always tell because they can always see the reticle. I would say, listen, no. Yes, you can get a good idea with things, and with a big enough field of view you can get more of an idea, but largely when you start looking through your reticle, you start seeing through the reticle. Life through the reticle is really how you start to see things, and it can be really disorientating. And a lot of the times, I know through the experience of using a bubble a lot, is I'll have it all set up and I'll be arguing with the bubble. So that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. But let's trust it. Let's do what it's doing. The bubble says that. I'll come back and verify it, and sure enough, the bubble level was right. It's just the environment I was looking at it really looked, when I'm laying down the rifle and behind the reticle, really looked like I got the rifle canted, when I really didn't, because the bubble level wasn't telling me lies. They may be different for you, but I would always say the bubble level is a very important thing for precision shooting. Anything over, your 200 yards, and 1,000 yards, it's not that important. 2,000 yards, it becomes a lot more important. But really, if extreme accuracy is important, it's important everywhere. So anyway, that's the bubble level. That's how we set it up with using spirit levels. There is another way. There is a few ways to do it. You could just use the plumb bob. You can just go through and with no equipment whatsoever, go through by eye and make sure your rifle is sitting straight. Make sure everything looks straight by standing behind it and look straight. Put your reticle, put your scope on, and use your plumb bob to make sure your reticle is straight to it. That's okay. It's potentially got a little bit of room for error in it, but that's still going to work. Another way to do it, take these fellas off here, which I've used in other things previously. I can't remember exactly where. I don't use it for this, but it is a school of thought, is to use something like a pair of straight edges. These are just a couple of straight pieces of aluminium. Check that they're straight by going one side together to the other side together. There's no bows or any of that. They're nice and straight, as tested by that. I can do the same thing by putting on, if I can find where it is, on the reticle, and then stand back and look and make sure those two things are level. A bit harder to do. You've really got to get out of range a little bit to see that, but then you can see that they're both straight. Now you have to do the same thing of that line to your plumb bob, but this is another way to do it. What we're actually doing is it becomes, to see a tiny bit of an angle in the turret, not so easy to see an angle in, it only takes a little bit of movement, and you can actually see quite easily that these are not lined up. So a pair of straight edges, they can be bits of wood, they can be bits of very straight steel, they can be proper straight edges, but that's another way to do it. I am a fan of, always been a fan of, little spirit levels. These are the type of things you can buy on eBay, that sort of stuff. There's all sorts of this sort of stuff. We got them with the laser defense systems on cars, so we got lots of them on that side of things. I won't get into that conversation, but yeah, that's a simple process. Done that, I would do the bubble level at the same time for a precision rifle, and you're golden. That's it. That's all that's involved. Anyway, guys, hope that was of some help, and we'll catch you next time.